The Galactic Assembly had existed for 12,000 years. It was a gathering of 73 different alien species, all united under one rule: expand peacefully, trade fairly, and never start wars without proper reason. The Assembly met on a massive space station that floated between three dying stars, a place so old that even the eldest species had forgotten who built it. In a temple carved from crystal that sang when the wind touched it, the elders gathered. They were ancient beings, their bodies thin and gray, their eyes holding the weight of centuries. They had watched empires rise and crumble to dust. They had seen proud species vanish from existence. They kept records of everything, stored in holographic crystals that glowed with soft blue light. Elder was the oldest among them. He had lived for 900 years, and his mind held memories that would drive lesser beings mad. When the message came that a new species had been discovered, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time: fear. "Show me," he commanded, and the crystals came alive. Images floated in the air before him. A small blue planet, third from a yellow sun. Water covered most of its surface. It looked peaceful, almost gentle, but the records told a different story. They had been watching Earth for a long time. They had seen the humans crawl out of caves and learn to make fire. They had watched them build cities and tear them down. They had witnessed wars that killed millions, plagues that wiped out entire populations, and disasters that should have ended the species forever. But the humans never stopped. They kept going. They buried their dead, dried their tears, and rebuilt, again and again and again. "They are coming to the assembly," a younger reported. "Their first ambassador ship launched 3 days ago." Closed his eyes. "Then we must warn the others." The assembly gathered in the great hall, a chamber so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. Delegates from dozens of species filled the floating platforms, each one representing worlds and populations beyond counting. The Dominion sent their finest warriors, their insect-like bodies covered in ceremonial armor. The collective appeared as shimmering forms of pure energy, their voices echoing like distant thunder. When spoke, many did not listen. They were too busy discussing trade routes and territorial disputes, but those who paid attention heard something strange in the old's voice. "A new species approaches," said. "They call themselves humans. They come from a world called Earth." Ambassador of the Dominion made a clicking sound with his mandibles. "Another primitive species seeking our guidance. How tedious." "You do not understand," replied. "These beings are different. Their history is written in blood and fire. They have faced extinction more times than any species we have ever recorded, and each time they have survived. They are not like us." The delegate laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Every species believes itself special, Elder. The humans are small, their world is small, and their technology is centuries behind ours. What could they possibly do?" Felt the weight of his years pressing down on him. "You do not listen. I am not speaking of their weapons or their ships. I am speaking of what lives inside them. When pushed, when threatened, when their people are in danger, they become something else, something terrible. You speak of legends," dismissed, "fairy tales to frighten children." "I speak of truth," said quietly. "But I see you will not hear it. Very well. Remember this moment when the humans arrive. Remember that we warned you." Far across the galaxy, the starship Endeavor cut through the darkness of space. It was not the largest ship humanity had ever built, but it was the fastest and the most advanced. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the stars streak past like rivers of light. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm brown eyes. 20 years in the space program had taught him patience. This mission would require all of it. "Commander," Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell said from her station, "we're receiving another transmission from the assembly. They're sending us approach coordinates." Daniel nodded. "How long until we arrive?" 14 hours at current speed." 14 hours. 14 hours until humanity met its neighbors for the first time. Daniel had read the briefings, studied the intelligence reports, and memorized everything they knew about the assembly species. It was not much. The invitation had been vague, almost dismissive, as if they were granting a favor to a child. Laura walked over to stand beside him. She was younger than Daniel, with sharp features and quick eyes that missed nothing. "You think they'll take us seriously?" "Probably not at first," Daniel admitted. "We're the new kids. Every new kid gets tested. And if they push too hard..." Daniel smiled slightly. "Then they'll learn what billions of years of evolution have taught us. We don't give up, we don't surrender, and we never ever forget." On Earth, the world watched and waited. For the first time in human history, nations had set aside their differences for a common purpose. The United Nations had created a new council specifically for alien relations. President Samuel Grant addressed the planet in a broadcast that reached every screen, every phone, every radio. "Today we take our first steps into a larger universe," he said. "We go in peace, we go with hope, but we also go with strength. Whatever waits for us among the stars, we will face it together. We are humanity, we are Earth, and we will not be afraid." In homes across the world, people gathered to watch. In New York, a father held his daughter on his shoulders so she could see the screen in Times Square. In Tokyo, an old woman lit incense and prayed for the travelers. In Cairo, children drew pictures of spaceships and alien worlds. None of them knew what was coming. None of them understood that their ambassadors were walking into a trap laid by beings who saw them as nothing more than insects to be stepped on. But the new elder sat alone in his crystal temple, watching the human ship draw closer to the assembly station. He had done what he could. He had given his warning. The younger races had laughed and dismissed him. They would not be laughing for long. "Earth's children," he whispered to the empty room, "I hope your people are as strong as your history suggests. You will need every bit of that strength in the days to come." The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small ship carrying humanity's hopes and dreams. The Endeavor flew on, and the galaxy held its breath. The warning had been given, the laughter had been heard. Soon there would be silence. The assembly station was larger than anything the human delegation had ever seen. It hung in space like a metal flower, its petals stretching outward for hundreds of kilometers. Lights blinked along its surface, and ships of every shape and size drifted around it like bees around a hive. Commander Daniel Hayes guided the Endeavor toward the docking bay, his hands steady on the controls. Beside him, Laura Mitchell monitored the dozens of alien vessels that passed nearby. Some slowed to look at them, their crews curious about the newcomers. Others ignored them completely. "We're being scanned," Laura reported. "Multiple frequencies, they're looking at everything." "Let them look," Daniel said. "We have nothing to hide." The docking process was smooth. The Endeavor settled into a bay designed for ships twice its size, surrounded by vessels that made it look like a toy. When the airlock opened, Ambassador Brooks stepped forward to lead the delegation. Was 62 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that had seen every trick in the diplomatic book. She had negotiated peace treaties in war zones and trade agreements in hostile boardrooms. This was just another negotiation, she told herself. Just another room full of people who thought they were better than everyone else. Captain Cole walked at her right side. He was the military advisor, a man built like a mountain with a face that rarely showed emotion. His job was to watch, listen, and protect. So far, he was not impressed by what he saw. The assembly delegates met them in a receiving hall filled with strange plants and floating light orbs. Ambassador of the Dominion stood at the center, his insect body towering over the humans. His compound eyes reflected their faces 1,000 times over. "Welcome to the Galactic Assembly," said, his voice buzzing through a translator device. "We are pleased that you have accepted our invitation." smiled warmly. "We are honored to be here. Humanity has dreamed of this moment for generations." "Yes, well," replied, "your species is quite young. Perhaps in time you will understand how things work in the greater galaxy." The dismissal was clear. Smile did not waver. "We are eager to learn." The tour of the station was designed to impress and intimidate. The guides showed them massive warships that could crack planets in half. The demonstrated technology that bent light and folded space. Everywhere the humans went, they were reminded of how small they were, how primitive, how insignificant. Cole took mental notes of everything. The warships were powerful, yes, but their designs were old. The technology was advanced, but it followed patterns, and patterns could be predicted. He said nothing, but his mind was already working on countermeasures. That evening, the delegation was given quarters in a section of the station reserved for lesser species. The rooms were small and the facilities were basic. It was another insult, and everyone knew it. "They're testing us," said, sitting on a hard bed that was clearly not designed for human bodies, "seeing how we react." "They're fools," replied quietly. "They're so busy looking down at us that they're not seeing what's right in front of them." Daniel entered the room, his face troubled. Laura intercepted something, a coded transmission between the and the. "They're talking about our colony routes." "What about them?" asked. "Trade routes, they call them. But the language suggests something else. They're planning to move through our space whether we agree or not." Closed her eyes. She had hoped for better. She had prayed that the galaxy would be a place of wonder and friendship. Instead, it was just like Earth had been for so long, a place where the strong took what they wanted from the weak. "We continue as planned," she said finally. "We smile, we learn, we gather information, and we report everything back home." The next day brought a formal reception in the Great Hall. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the chamber, their conversations creating a noise like a storm. The humans stood together in a small group, surrounded by beings who barely acknowledged their existence. Elder found standing alone near a window that looked out at the stars. He approached slowly, his ancient body moving with careful precision. "Ambassador Brooks," he said, "I am Elder of the—" Turned to face him. There was something different about this alien, something in his eyes that the others lacked. Wisdom, perhaps, or sadness. "Elder, I've heard that your species keeps the histories of the galaxy." "We do," confirmed. "We have watched many species come and go. We have seen their triumphs and their failures, and we have watched your people for a very long time." Felt a chill run down her spine. "What have you seen?" Was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. "We have seen a species that refuses to die. We have seen your wars, your plagues, your disasters. We have seen you fight each other and destroy your own world. But we have also seen you rebuild, again and again, with a determination that defies all logic. Your people are not like the others here, Ambassador. You are something new, something the galaxy has not faced before." "Is that a warning?" "It is a plea," said. "Leave this place, take your people and go home. The and the see you as prey. They do not understand what they are dealing with. When they push you, and they will push you, something terrible will happen. I have seen the pattern. I know how this story ends." Met his ancient eyes. "We can't leave. This is our chance to join the galactic community, to learn and grow." "Then learn this," said. "When the moment comes, and it will come, remember that they tried to warn them. Remember that they laughed. And when the silence falls, know that it was not your fault." He turned and walked away, leaving alone with her thoughts and the endless stars. That night, in the small quarters of the human delegation, shared what had told her. The room was quiet when she finished. "He thinks they're going to attack us," Daniel said. "He thinks they're going to try," corrected. "And he seems to think we're going to do something about it that will shake the galaxy." Cole stood by the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the starlight. "Then we need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Laura asked. turned to face them, and for the first time since they had arrived, he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. For whatever comes next. Outside, the assembly station hummed with alien life, its inhabitants going about their business, confident in their power and their place in the universe. They had no idea that the small group of humans in the forgotten corner of their station were already planning, already preparing. The warning had been given. The laughter continued. But somewhere in the darkness of space, the clock was ticking toward a moment that would change everything. 6 months passed after the human delegation returned to Earth. In that time, humanity continued its expansion into space. Colony ships carried families to new worlds, filled with hope and dreams of fresh beginnings. Scientists mapped new star systems. Engineers built stations and outposts. Life went on. The Endeavour had returned to patrol duty, guarding the shipping lanes that connected Earth's colonies. Commander Daniel Hayes spent his days watching the stars and thinking about what Elder had said. The warning stayed with him like a splinter in his mind, small but impossible to ignore. On a Tuesday morning that seemed like any other, 3 colony ships departed from the orbital station above Earth. The vessels were named Hope, Dawn, and Promise, and they carried 50,000 people between them. Families with children, young couples starting new lives, elderly citizens seeking adventure in their final years. They were heading to a planet called New Eden, a world that humanity had spent years making ready for settlement. Lieutenant Commander Laura Mitchell was on the Endeavour's bridge when the distress signal came through. It was weak, broken, and lasted only seconds before cutting off completely. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with concern, "the colony ships, all 3 of them, they've stopped transmitting." Daniel was at her side in an instant. Location: Sector 7, near the border of space. They were following the approved route. "Get me a visual." The screen flickered to life, showing nothing but empty space. Where 3 massive ships carrying 50,000 souls should have been, there was only darkness and distant stars. "They're gone," Laura whispered. The news hit Earth like a physical blow. 50,000 people, including 8,000 children, had vanished without a trace. Families crowded around screens, desperate for information. Prayers were offered in every language. Candles were lit in windows across the world. Ambassador Brooks demanded an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly. She stood before the gathered delegates, her silver hair gleaming under the artificial lights, her voice steady despite the fury burning in her heart. "3 of our colony ships have disappeared," she said. 50,000 of our people gone. We demand an investigation." Ambassador of the Dominion rose from his platform, his compound eyes glittering with something that might have been amusement. "Regrettable," he said. "Space is dangerous, especially for inexperienced species. Perhaps your ships encountered a natural phenomenon beyond their ability to handle." "Our ships were on approved routes," replied. "Routes that your assembly guaranteed were safe." "Guarantees are not certainties," said smoothly. "The universe is vast and full of dangers. We cannot be responsible for every mishap that befalls a young species learning to walk among the stars." Felt her hands trembling. She clasped them behind her back to hide her anger. "We are not asking you to be responsible. We are asking for help finding our people." The delegate spoke, its energy form pulsing with colors that might have been impatience. "Resources are limited. We cannot divert our fleets to search for ships that are likely already destroyed. Perhaps you should consider keeping your people closer to home until you are better prepared for the realities of space travel." In that moment understood everything. The dismissals, the condescension, the warnings that Elder had given. This was not negligence. This was a message. She looked across the chamber and found, watching her from his platform. The ancient's eyes held sorrow and something else. Recognition. He knew what was happening. He had always known. Straightened her spine. "We will find our people ourselves," she said. "And when we do, we will remember who offered help and who did not." She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of aliens who were already turning back to their own concerns, dismissing the humans as they dismissed everything else. On Earth, President Samuel Grant watched the recording of the assembly session with a face carved from stone. His advisors sat around him in the Situation Room, silent and grim. "They took our people," General Lisa Monroe said flatly. "They took them. Our intelligence confirms warships in Sector 7 at the time of the disappearance." "Can we prove it?" Grant asked. "Not in any court they would recognize, but we know." Grant stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over Washington, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, beyond that beautiful sky, 50,000 of his people were waiting, hopping, praying for rescue. "They think we're weak," he said quietly. "They think we'll accept this, file protests, make speeches, and eventually forget." "Will we?" General Monroe asked. Grant turned to face her. His eyes were cold in a way that none of them had ever seen before. "Issue the orders. Every military vessel we have goes to full alert. Call back all ambassadors from assembly space, and contact Admiral Warren. Tell her Operation Silent Thunder is approved." The room erupted in activity. Across the planet, messages flew at the speed of light. Military bases that had been quiet for years suddenly came alive with activity. Ships that had been in dock underwent rapid preparations for departure. Soldiers who had been enjoying peaceful assignments found themselves receiving new orders. In orbit, Fleet Admiral Warren read her orders twice to make sure she understood them correctly. Then she smiled. "All ships," she transmitted across every human vessel in space. "This is Fleet Admiral Warren. The Dominion has taken our people. The Assembly has refused to help. As of this moment, we are at war, not a war of conquest or territory, a war of rescue, a war of justice. Find our people, bring them home, and make them understand exactly what kind of mistake they have made." On the Endeavor, Commander Daniel Hayes received the transmission. He looked at Laura Mitchell, at the crew who had become his family over the years. They looked back at him with determination in their eyes. "Set course for space," Daniel ordered. "Maximum speed." "What's the plan?" Laura asked. Daniel thought about Elder, about the warnings that had been ignored, about the laughter that had echoed through the assembly halls. "The plan is simple," he said. "We remind the galaxy why the Elders were afraid. We show them what humanity does when someone takes our children, and when we're done, no one will ever laugh at us again." The Endeavor jumped to faster-than-light speed, followed by hundreds of other human vessels. They moved in silence, without declarations of war or formal announcements. They had attacked without warning. Humanity would respond in kind. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 50,000 people waited for rescue. They did not know that help was coming. They did not know that their home planet had transformed from a place of peace into a planet of quiet, focused rage. But they would know soon. Everyone would know soon. The laughter was about to end. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had fought wars against a dozen species and won every single one. Their military doctrine was carved in stone. Issue a formal declaration, gather your forces, meet the enemy in open battle and crush them with superior numbers. It was clean, predictable, and effective. They expected humanity to follow the same rules. They were wrong. The first attack came without warning, without declaration, without any of the formalities that they considered essential to civilized warfare. One moment, the high command station was humming with normal activity. The next moment, the lights went out. Human ships had appeared from nowhere, moving in patterns that sensors could not track. They struck at communication relays, power stations, and supply lines. They did not engage the massive warships in direct combat. They simply made those warships blind, deaf, and hungry. Admiral Warren watched the tactical display from the bridge of the carrier Independence. Around her, Officers worked with calm efficiency, coordinating attacks across a dozen star systems simultaneously. High Command is dark, her tactical officer reported. Fleet movements are in chaos. They're trying to regroup, but without central coordination, they're just spinning in circles. Good, Warren said. Move to Phase 2, find the prison facility. Across space, human intelligence teams had been working for weeks, following leads and intercepting communications. They had found what they were looking for, a moon in the outer reaches of territory, heavily guarded and completely off the official records. The colonists were there. Commander Daniel Hayes led the rescue mission personally. The Endeavour was not the largest ship in the fleet, but it was the fastest and the most experienced. Beside him, Laura Mitchell coordinated with the ground teams preparing for insertion. Security around the facility is heavy, Laura reported. But they're not expecting an attack. They think the war is happening elsewhere. Then let's not disappoint them, Daniel replied. The Endeavour dropped out of faster-than-light speed in the shadow of the moon, hidden from sensors by the bulk of rock and ice. Boarding shuttles launched in complete silence, carrying soldiers trained for exactly this kind of operation. Captain Cole was on the first shuttle. He had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, studying architecture, learning their patrol patterns, planning every step of the infiltration. His team moved like ghosts through the facility's corridors, taking out guards before they could raise alarms. The soldiers never stood a chance. They were trained for formal battle, for standing in lines and exchanging fire. They had no concept of close-quarters combat, of hand-to-hand fighting, of the brutal efficiency that humanity had perfected through thousands of years of war against itself. Found the holding cells on the facility's lower level. 50,000 people crammed into spaces designed for half that number. They looked up as the doors opened, their faces showing fear, then confusion, then overwhelming joy. "Who are you?" a young mother asked, clutching her child to her chest. Removed his helmet so she could see his face. "United Earth Military, ma'am. We're here to take you home." The evacuation took 3 hours. Shuttles flew back and forth between the facility and the waiting transport ships, carrying the colonists to safety. Medical teams treated the injured. Counselors spoke with those who had suffered the worst. Through it all, the soldiers maintained a protective perimeter, ready to defend their people against any counterattack. But no counterattack came. They were too busy trying to figure out what was happening to their empire. On the assembly station, Ambassador received the reports with growing horror. Human ships had appeared in 8 different systems. Communications were down across half of the Dominion. The fleet was scattered and leaderless. And somehow, impossibly, the prison facility had been breached. "How is this happening?" demanded. "They're primitives. They have no experience in galactic warfare." His advisors had no answers. The truth was something they could not understand. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting, not just for territory or resources, but for survival. They had fought ice ages and plagues. They had fought each other with everything from rocks to nuclear weapons. They had learned lessons that no other species in the galaxy had ever needed to learn. Lessons about speed and surprise, about striking where the enemy was weak, about doing whatever was necessary to protect the people they loved. They fought wars like games, with rules and rituals and expected outcomes. Humanity fought wars like survival, with everything on the line and no limits on what they would do to win. In the assembly chambers, Elder watched the reports with a mixture of sadness and grim satisfaction. The younger delegates were panicking, demanding that something be done to stop the humans. They had withdrawn their representatives entirely, suddenly interested in staying far away from the conflict. "Elder," a young asked, "you knew this would happen. Why didn't you stop it?" "I tried," replied. "I warned them. I begged them to leave the humans alone. They laughed at me. They laughed at the very idea that such a small species could be a threat." "And now," gestured at the chaos around them. Now they learn what we learned long ago. Humanity is not dangerous because of their weapons or their technology. They are dangerous because of what lives inside them, a fire that never goes out, a will that never breaks. When you threaten their children, you awaken something ancient and terrible. They have poked a sleeping dragon, and now they will burn. Approached his compound, eyes wild with fear. You must speak to them. You must make them stop. They'll destroy us. Looked at the ambassador for a long moment. You took their children. You laughed when they asked for help. Now you want me to save you. Please. The ancient shook his head slowly. The time for intervention has passed. You made your choice when you took those ships. Now you face the consequences. This is not my battle. It is yours, and I do not think you will win. On the transport ship Horizon, the rescued colonists gathered in the observation deck to watch the stars streak past. They were going home. After months of captivity, after fear and despair and loss of hope, they were going home. A little girl pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with wonder. Her mother stood behind her, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," the girl asked, "are the bad aliens going to come after us again?" Her mother knelt down beside her. "No, sweetheart, the bad aliens made a very big mistake. They hurt us, and now our soldiers are making sure they can never hurt anyone again." How? The mother thought about the soldiers who had come for them, the quiet efficiency of the rescue, the look in Captain Cole's eyes when he had promised them safety. "Because that's what humans do," she said finally. "When someone hurts our family, we make sure it never happens again." The stars continued to flow past the window, carrying them toward home. Behind them, the Dominion was falling apart, piece by piece, as humanity demonstrated exactly what happened when you provoked Earth's rage. The laughter had stopped. Now there was only silence. 1 year had passed since the rescue of the colonists. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one had predicted. The Dominion, once the most powerful military force in the Assembly, had shattered into a dozen squabbling factions. Their fleet was a shadow of what it had been. Their economy was in ruins. Their leaders had been replaced by others, who were then replaced again as blame was passed from one to another. The collective had quietly withdrawn their expansion fleets from every border they shared with human space. They sent diplomats instead of warships, bearing gifts and speaking of peaceful cooperation. Their energy forms pulsed with colors that the humans had learned to recognize as anxiety and fear. And humanity had gone back to its normal life. The soldiers returned to their families. The colonists settled on New Eden, building homes and planting gardens. The ships went back to exploration and trade. It was as if the war had never happened. But the galaxy remembered. Ambassador Brooks stood once again in the great hall of the Assembly, but this time she was not surrounded by dismissive aliens looking down at her. This time, the platforms were arranged in a circle, with humanity given a position of equal standing. This time, when she spoke, everyone listened. "We did not come to the stars to conquer," said. "We came to explore, to learn, to share what we have with others, and to receive what others have to give. Humanity believes in peace. We believe in cooperation. We believe that the universe is big enough for all of us." She paused, letting her words settle over the silent chamber. "But let this be understood by everyone who hears my voice. Humanity protects its own. We will never start a war. We will never attack without reason. We will never take what belongs to others. But if you threaten our people, if you take our children, if you mistake our kindness for weakness, you will discover why the elders whispered of Earth's rage." The hall was quiet. Not a single alien spoke or moved. They had all seen what happened to they had no desire to experience it themselves. "We offer friendship," continued. "We offer partnership. We offer the chance to build something greater together than any of us could build alone. The choice is yours. We hope you choose wisely." She stepped back from the speaking platform. For a long moment there was only silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the alien delegates began to signal their acceptance. Trade agreements were proposed. Cultural exchanges were offered. Scientific partnerships were suggested. Humanity had arrived, and this time no one was laughing. On a distant world, Elder sat in his crystal temple, watching the assembly proceedings on a floating holographic screen. The younger who served as his assistants gathered around him, their faces filled with questions. Elder, one of them asked, "What happens now? They are broken. They are afraid. Humanity has shown its strength. Will they become the new power in the galaxy?" Considered the question carefully. He had lived for nearly 1,000 years, and in all that time, he had never seen a species quite like humanity. "I do not think so," he said finally. "That is what makes them remarkable." "I don't understand." Gestured at the screen, where Brooks was now shaking hands with delegates who had mocked her just a year before. The fought for power, the fought for resources. When they won battles, they took territory and tribute. They expanded their empires and demanded submission from the defeated. And the humans? The humans fought for their people, only for their people. The moment the colonists were safe, the moment the threat was removed, they stopped. They did not demand territory. They did not take resources. They did not humiliate thee or force them to pay tribute. They simply stopped. The young processed this information. They did not want revenge. "Oh, they wanted revenge," said with something that might have been a smile. "But they did not take it. They had the completely at their mercy. They could have destroyed them entirely, wiped out their civilization, taken everything they had. Instead, they rescued their people and went home." "Why?" Looked at his young assistant with ancient, wise eyes. "Because that is who they are. They are protectors, not conquerors. They fight only when they must and only as long as they must. They do not seek power for its own sake. They seek only to keep their people safe. And if someone threatens their people again..." The old turned back to the screen, where humanity's ambassador was now laughing with delegates from worlds that had never before shown humans any respect. "Then whatever species makes that mistake will learn the same lesson they learned. The same lesson I tried to teach the assembly all those years ago." "What lesson is that?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle. "Never wake a sleeping dragon. Never threaten a mother's child. Never underestimate a species that has survived everything the universe has thrown at it and come back stronger every time. The humans are not the most powerful species in the galaxy. They are not the most advanced or the most numerous, but they are the most determined. And that determination, that refusal to give up, that willingness to do whatever is necessary to protect their own, that is what makes them terrifying." Far across the galaxy, on a beautiful blue planet orbiting a yellow sun, life continued as it always had. Children went to school. Families shared meals. Lovers watched sunsets. Old friends gathered to remember those who had passed. New friends met and began their journeys together. They did not think of themselves as terrifying. They did not think of themselves as a species that made empires tremble. They thought of themselves as ordinary people living ordinary lives, trying to be happy, trying to be good, trying to leave the world a little better than they found it. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, in the halls of power on 100 different worlds, beings who had once laughed at humanity now spoke of them in whispers. Stories were told of the human fleet that had appeared from nowhere and brought a mighty empire to its knees. Warnings were passed from elder to youth, from parent to child. Do not threaten Earth. Do not take their people. Do not mistake their peace for weakness. For if you do, you will learn why the old ones whispered of their rage. And you will learn it in silence. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the stars drift past. The ship was on its way to a new mission, a peaceful one this time, surveying a nebula that had never been explored. Laura Mitchell worked at her station nearby, humming a song from Earth. "Commander," she said, Do you think we'll have to fight again? Daniel considered the question. He thought about the colonies spreading across the stars, about the children growing up on new worlds, about the future that humanity was building in the vast darkness of space. Probably, he admitted. There's always someone who thinks they can push us around, someone who looks at us and sees prey instead of people. And what happens to them? Daniel smiled slightly. They learn, one way or another they learn. The Endeavour continued on its journey, carrying its crew toward new horizons and new adventures. Behind them, Earth turned slowly in the light of its sun, home to billions of people who lived and loved and dreamed of tomorrow. They were not warriors, they were not conquerors, they were simply human. And that was enough. The elders had whispered of Earth's rage, the young ones had laughed. Now there was only silence. And in that silence, humanity went on living.